So it is my distinct honor to introduce our keynote speaker for today. Richard Lett led the protection of senior members of the British royal family and coordinated protection operations at major state and international events. Highlights include the weddings of Prince Charles and Camilla in 2005, Prince William and Catherine in 2011, the 200-year commemoration of the Battle of Trafalgar in 2005, and the Queen's Jubilee celebrations in 2002 and 2012. In 2012, Richard commanded the VIP protection operation in central London for the London Olympic and Paralympic Games. Richard has always been committed to sport, training, and youth projects. He has taken several years out of his police career to work as team leader for Drive for Youth and Ex-Offender Drug Rehabilitation Back to Work program, and Raleigh International, a UK gap year charity, joining expeditions in Zimbabwe, Chile, and Belize. In 1991, Richard won the British Sub-Aqua Club's Wilkinson Sword for achievements as an advanced diver instructor. In 1995, the BBC produced a documentary highlighting Richard's role in the rescue of 3 men, one a U.S. citizen, off the coast of Belize. And in 2001, Richard became a Royal Yachting Association Yacht Master Offshore Instructor. Wow, I wonder if that came with a name tag. In 2012, Richard retired immediately after the London Olympics closing ceremony to be with his wife, Margaret, who was born and raised in Minnesota. And after 32 years with Scotland Yard's Royalty Protection Department, after serving 32 years, immediately after his wedding, Richard sailed single-handed in his yacht called Pathways to Children across the Atlantic Ocean, yes, from Plymouth, England, to Newport, Rhode Island. Queen Elizabeth II made Richard a member of the Royal Victorian Order in the 2013 British New Year's Honours Awards for his loyal service to the UK and the royal family. He now lives and works full-time in Minnesota as the executive director of the Minnesota Benefits Association, a nonprofit representing the Minnesota public sector. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Mr. Richard Lett.
I'm trying to hit that magical slot between you all having eaten and falling asleep. So if you nudge each other, that'll be great. So today, some of you have heard me talk, and I talk a little bit about some motivation, some leadership things, tell stories about events, people, and adventures that I've been part of. Some of you have heard those stories, but Kevin asked me to talk about something grittier today, something that's sort of be really good for an Ignite and leadership conference. So I'm going to start, there's 2 subjects I'm going to talk about today. One is decision making. I can see people wincing at the thought of making a decision. And I'm going to talk a little bit about volunteers, if we get the opportunity. So, if I press this, will my slides advance?
Press the right. Yeah.
Yay! There's America taking over Great Britain. So, decisions, okay? And I know you've had some wonderful talks today, some wonderful presentations, you've all coming away with some great ideas, and you've absolutely, resolutely decided to make decisions today, I know. The rest of us will probably reflect on it over the weekend and seek consultation with our partners, family, friends, children. Maybe Monday morning we'll think about it then again, and we'll get a group together at work, consultants, maybe have a meeting, get some strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats done it, environmental, legal, all that stuff. And when we've absolutely got all our ducks in a row, and we're really ready and prepared for this decision, we'll ask the board what they think. It's great, of course decisions need to be made that way, and of course that's what happens. To some extent, it's collaborative. You've heard that word today. So it's a collaborative process, and that's wonderful. So I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about a slightly different kind of decision. There are some decisions, and you are leaders in this room, that's why you're here. You have elected yourself as leaders, you have attended this conference, you've made that effort. But there are some decisions that we cannot absolutely duck. They come our way, that's when we have to stand up, they're often rare. They come along every now and again, and as a leader, at that time, we need to make a spontaneous decision that can have huge impacts, one way or the other. And then you know why you're the leader. You know why you're the CEO, because everyone else is ducking and you're the only one left on the parapet. So we're going to talk a little bit about those decisions. Because I had a couple to make on this day back in 2005, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit about. And I'm not entirely convinced I made all the right decisions in the right time and in the right process, because to some extent, one always gets paralysed when there's a big decision to be made. Doubt creeps in. So, just going to give you an overview of events so we're all on the same page. 2005, the London bombings known as 7/7. 56 people were killed in, effectively, there were 3 simultaneous explosions in the London Underground, deep underground between stations. Subsequently, a short while after, there was the bombing on the bus that blew off the top of the bus and more people killed. So there were 56 people killed and 700 injured. So I'm going to take you back to, so we know what happened. And if you knew this was what happened, about hindsight, we did some analysis on this, we could all make some really good decisions on hindsight. I'm going to take you back to 847. 7th of July was the day after we got awarded, we beat the French. The French were the favourites for what? For the Olympic bid. Everyone had, all the money was on France. Okay, and when the announcement was made, London was successful. That was on the 6th of July. So when I'm in the office running the control room for VIP protection operations in London, what do you think I'm talking about with everybody? Yeah, we beat the French. And we start to think how many people are going to come, what resources we need. You know, so we really enjoy it. This is a wonderful day. This is not even 14 hours after we won the bid. So 3 tube trains, packed with London commuters, and 4 young men killed themselves. This was the first ever suicide bombing in London. It was the first coordinated Islamic attack in London. And it happened just as that commuters sort of rush out. I mean, it must have been horrendous. But what happened at that time? The explosions were between stations. To some extent, we were getting reports from over 6 stations of an incident because the blast came both ways to the tunnels to 2 different platforms. The communications were knocked out, so there are sort of loop communications deep down underground. They were all knocked out. Anyone who was down there with the radios weren't working. London Transport, so the information, all of us in London at this point, at 8:48 when the bombs went off, had no idea that this had happened. It doesn't happen that quickly. So everybody in London is still piling into stations, piling onto buses, filling up London for the day's work. The rest of us are still enjoying, reflecting on the Olympics, thinking about, let's go for a cup of coffee and discuss the implications for our department, for us, etc. at this point. It's a wonderful sunny day. It starts to emerge then, through the systems, the sheer volume of calls that come in, bring Vodafone phone, and all the mobile networks come to a halt. They crash. There are certain units and departments and special operations type people, we have a bit of a pass on that. So all the mobile networks still function for us. But who's responding to these calls? The regular cops, the London ambulance, all the first responders are going. They're all shut down, so they've got no communications as they go down into these tunnels. And what do you think they're finding? You know, it must have been pretty grim. So, the communications have gone down, London Transport then tell us that 3 things have happened. One is the train has been derailed. That's what's happened. 2, that there's been a huge power surge on the network causing some explosions of electrical cables. And 3, they've got people under a train. So that's the official notification. So we know that something's happened. London Transport, who own the network, tell us it's these 3 things which are plausible. So, you know your hair's going up and you think, this just seems too much. 3 events on the same day at the same time. You're starting to think one way. Could I make a decision at this point? What was I responsible for? Let's put you some context there. We had 17 protection operations running in London that day. We had heads of state from around the world going to conferences, meeting other VIPs. We had the Queen going to events, Prince Charles. So people were either in and around London going to events, or very shortly, between 9 and 10 o'clock, were going to be leaving their residences, getting with protection details and going to other events. So my job in the control room was to make a call to pull all those people. Because what's at risk? Not only the security of these people, but what's one of the biggest risks, and this is even a corporate issue? Reputational risk. What if we allow heads of state to still be driving around London when their people, their protection details, are not being informed there's a major attack happening on London? What does it say about our competence? What does it say that in a few years' time we're going to be running an Olympic Games? What does it say about our reputation? Also, these people are going to events that are supported by other police officers, other members of the public that are coming in on these transport systems. Should we be adding the Queen going to a major event in London at this time? What we should be doing is pulling everybody, because that just takes all the pressure off the first responders who can focus on their job. So there's many reasons to, and it's not just one you might think about the protection of these people. It's all of the other issues to do with both reputation and freeing up resources for what's the key thing now, which is responding to what's taking place. So why am I showing you this photograph? This actually isn't from 7/7. I'm also now populating your thought-thinking process about when you make decisions about what you already know. So there was 3 or 4 things that I already knew. What you see in the photograph here was at the top of the escalator systems at King's Cross. So I was a police officer a few years before this, and I was one of the responders to the King's Cross fire. Over 40 people were incinerated on the platform of King's Cross because a fire was started on the escalator system. It drew the air up through that system and it just turned it into an inferno. Over 100 people were severely burned. I knew the chaos that it caused because I was there. So etched in my memory, my experience, my decision-making process was my experiences. And my experiences told me that when you get an incident on the underground, a derailment that we were told, a person under a train or a power surge, that you can't get clarity for what's happened for some time. And all the first responders are so up in the sort of the muck and bullets of the situation, they're not going to stop, reflect and tell you what's really happened, because I was there and I knew it. So that was the other thing. This is another memorial to an incident that happened a few years before. It was the Moorgate train crash. Over 50 people were killed when a train driver had a collapse, probably a heart attack, as he drove his train in towards Moorgate Station, which unfortunately was the end of the line, and the train at full speed hit the end of the buffers. Many people were killed, many people were injured, and just to recover that train and the bodies took forever. And I remember that as well. There are other things. The press have been reporting the likelihood of an attack on the underground for the last couple of years. The press actually like that story because it's one that, you know, you can be alarmist. The press like a little bit of an alarm. So that's appearing on the front page about this threat. Now, sure, we knew the vulnerability, we knew the risk that this could happen, and it was something that we were very concerned about. What we didn't necessarily need was the press running this story with such frequency that did it or did it not create the idea itself. On this day, on 7/7, there was actually a BBC team taking footage and recordings at another London underground station, so they had footage in case an attack such as this ever happened. They were getting that pre-feed stuff. And then they heard this was happening, they thought it was some sort of joke. And this was the bus. So, coming on to volunteers, much better story. So, just to put you in my place, let's say you know where I am. It's 8:47, you know what subsequently happened. I know what London Transport are telling me. I know I've got 17 teams in and around London, many of which are due to depart their residences. I've got all this pre-knowledge and experience, and I am prevaricating. I'm thinking, do I put the call out, all teams, you know, whatever the codes, whatever the protocols for doing that are, effectively, do I tell every single protection team in London and across the UK to come back to a safe house, let me know that you're there, let's account for everybody? A, because I don't want them causing a problem, B, because I don't want them to be exposed to any risk. I am mulling over this decision. How easy is it? How many times do you think I can cry wolf? How many times do you think you can tell the Queen and the 17 other heads of state, actually run for it? Yeah, leggy. Panic. So we practice, and it's something that really occurs to me about this, about my own decision-making process. It's that we spend so much time trying to be calm, trying to be cool, trying to react to incidents that happen and try and play it down, because partly it's the confidence of the people around us, and suddenly all of a sudden there's something that I am feeling absolutely needs to be made and I can't really make it. What helped me? All the bombs were meant to go off at the same time. The fourth bomb on the bus went off about half an hour or so later. I was in the office, and it was a lovely summer's day. Our control room is in a beautiful London house. You wouldn't even know where it is, and you wouldn't even know what it is. The windows are slightly open, and I heard this explosion. I heard this bomb. It was about 2 miles from where I was. And I knew immediately it was an explosion. It was something deep, primeval. I'm not sure what sense that hits. I don't think I even had the opportunity to think of my next steps before I am just shouting out. I don't know if everyone in the room heard it, but I'd heard that explosion, and I knew from my background and my past that was an explosion, and it just triggered something in my mind that suddenly decisions become really easy. And you know that sometimes decisions are really easy, aren't they? Because there it is, there's the smoking gun, there's the proof, there's the reason why you have to do it, and all of a sudden that bomb woke me up out of my indecision into immediate decision. Partly I'm telling you the story because decisions are hard. And partly I'm telling you the story to share my pain with you as a bit of therapy. That those of us, those of you that are entrusted to make decisions, there are sometimes other impediments, there are other things in the way of you making it. And I know that you've made decisions today. I know you have. And I'm just encouraging you, try and reflect on those impediments, and don't necessarily wait for the bomb to go off in your head, metaphorically speaking, before you do something about it. Volunteers. Oh, can I have another 2 minutes just to read something to somebody? Because it's something, actually, I had this written down, and I wasn't going to read it, but so many people have said things this morning about innovation and change. I'm not going to read the whole thing. So, a lot of people have said things about change. Just listen to this statement. This is one of the bombers. You know they do these videos that get played on TV and Al Jazeera, etc. after they've done these things. This is one of the bombers. I and thousands like me are forsaking everything for what we believe. Our drive and motivation doesn't come from intangible commodities that this world has to offer. Our religion is Islam. Obedience is to one true God and following the footsteps of the final prophet messenger. Your democratically elected governments continuously perpetuate atrocities against my people all over the world. And your support of them makes you directly responsible. Just as I am directly responsible for protecting and avenging my Muslim brothers and sisters, until we feel security, you will be our targets. And until you stop bombing, gassing, imprisoning and torturing my people, we will not stop this fight. We are at war and I am a soldier. Now you too will taste the reality of this situation. Now, the reason that I think that's relevant in relation to innovation and change, doesn't really seem as if it could be, does it? Is that was in 2005. We're in 2015, 10 years later, almost. And we're talking about change, we're talking about ignite, we're talking about a narrative. That narrative is as fresh today on their side and as compelling today on their side. And I just don't think, with all the intelligence that we have, all the communities in the world, could we not come together and come up with a better vision, something more compelling? And I suppose to some extent, as much as you think about your own innovation and challenge, I just challenge all of us. Somehow, let's offer them something better, because that sort of narrative is just it's so fresh today. Actually, all the people that were killed on that day represented almost every religion and every country in the world. Almost every religion and every country or ethnic group were victims that day. You wouldn't believe that was about decision making, would you? But you get where I'm going with decisions. Sometimes they're super easy and sometimes they're not, and sometimes they're really important to make, and you as a leader have got to make it. And that's when you know that you're the leader. Yay. I knew the room would have gone a little bit quiet. I didn't mean that. I just think sometimes decisions are so important. I want you to make them. As much as I might be rubbish at them, I want you to be better than me. Do I have a point on this thing? There's me. Look, again, I'm in front of you today, and I thought, I should have got a haircut before today. And I remember this day, I've been so busy, there I am with a huge haircut again, thinking I needed a haircut. Please. I tell stories about the Archbishop and other things sometimes. Whilst I'm talking, you can play a little game yourself to see how many heads of state and royal members you can see. That's just one snapshot from within the church. So here I am talking a little bit about volunteers, if I may switch it. Because what I've realised over my career, almost every single event, everything that I've done, has actually engaged volunteers. As much as I've got my sort of professional colleagues around me, and we all think we're doing it, we're doing the security. You know, if I was up at St Andrews with William, I'm not going to say what technologies we had or how many people we had, but let me tell you, we had the people of St Andrews. It was the baker, it was the newsagent, it was the community. Volunteering in the community is so similar that all came together and said, we want William to be happy here, we want him to have privacy here. And it was them that were shooing people away, telling us when there was a reporter around. It was all the hotels, it was volunteering. People volunteering information that made the community better. At the wedding, a decision I made in the very early days of this was I wanted to know who was going to be, let's say, on duty from the church side. Now, we all know that people volunteer at church. So I wanted them all together because actually they were going to outnumber my side so much I wanted to engage them. I wanted to see if they had any questions on me. They might be concerned about what we would do. In the event of certain things happening, if they're there, am I going to get shot? Am I going to get blown up? Are you going to hit me? So I thought a little bit of reassurance was required. So I bring them all in, we're in a meeting like this, and everyone's around, and the first thing I do, and I've learned this about volunteers, I've always learned this about volunteers, ask who they are. I've got a woman there who's the CEO of a British arms company. She supplies the widgets that powers the drones that are perpetuating, the conflict and the war. This was a woman from a multi-million-pound company that was a member of the church. And there she was that day, sat very, very conscientiously in the front row, waiting for my leadership. There was a man who was Queen's Counsel, one of the top lawyers in the land. There was a lord. There was somebody, because this was Westminster Abbey, his local church, he was in the House of Lords over a Parliament. He was sat there in the audience as well. And so there was this sort of very humble, ignorant, uneducated policeman, suddenly getting to know my audience. I say, right, these are amazing people. And it was so important to get to know them and actually share a little bit about our objectives and our role, utilise their skills, and I just found they were just wonderful. I just always found that whatever the operation is, it's the volunteers that make it or breaking. And for a short-term operation like this, the wedding was a one-off event, it was really important to engage them right from the beginning. Now one thing, again, perhaps it's a leadership thing, it's about volunteers, I noticed on the day, people were getting a little bit nervous. I'd been up in the Goring Hotel earlier in the day, and I noticed that there was another young woman who was getting a little bit nervous, and she wanted to ask me a few questions about whether we could get the hairdresser into the church after she got in the car, and could I confirm that I'd managed to sneak the dress designer into the church before the press got to find out who it was. These were the really important issues on the day. So I drove all the way to the Goring Hotel because these questions were all asked of me, and I should have been back here. And when I got back to the church, I called everyone. I noticed that everyone was nervous, and I thought, nervousness is not going to make this event the joyous occasion that it should be. So I thought something I always wanted to do, and someone else talked here, Peter, was it about being a preacher as a young boy? I did something I always wanted to do. I got in the pulpit at Westminster Abbey. I didn't put the hat on, but I got in the pulpit. And I called everybody around, and I just said, without going into what I said, I said, it's ever so important that my team, you all get to know them, you shake hands, you all say hello to each other. I was setting the scene that whose day is this? Is it Britain's day? Is it the church's day? Is it William's day? No, it's not. It's Catherine's day. And if anyone thinks it's anything other than Catherine's day, you should leave this church now. And I tell them, everything that I've done is to make sure that William and Catherine have a wonderful day today. And that's why you won't see very little security or police. If you ever watch the wedding, you see almost none of it, because I made sure that we were very, very low key, and all the camera angles were all hidden, and I thought, this is not about us. Security can do one thing real well. What can security do real well? Ruin events. We have more ability to ruin things than you would ever know. So, I just did this little bit of Eva Battle speech, and the final thought was, you know how to do a wedding, my guys know how to do security, everything that we've done today is my responsibility, I'm in charge to that extent, everyone knows who I am, I've told you who I am, if it goes wrong it's my fault. Get on with it and have a great day. And that's what they did, it was a wonderful day. And then I was just going to finish, just to say that point about volunteers, because for all the things like talking about intelligence and threats, and we talked about bombings in the beginning there, it was the volunteers at the London Olympics. If anyone was in London, was anyone in London? Did anyone go? Anyone said, the London, and this is something else about volunteers. If you run a party where you invite anybody into your house, or Kevin invites you here today, the feeling of being a host is a wonderful thing, isn't it? The effort a host or hostess will go to when it's your house, your guest. Everybody here, there was some talk, I remember back in 2005, about what the volunteer strategy should be and should they be paid. And I remember someone saying, no, they won't be paid at all. I promise you they will come. And they did. Because if you give people the right vision and you say it's a community event and you make sure that they're trained and they feel all part of it, they will give and they will deliver. And the interesting thing about this, it wasn't a one-off event. This was months. And I would go to my briefings 6, 7 o'clock. I actually used to always walk from my hotel so I could take the air and feel the atmosphere of London. And I would see them with their stupid hands pointing people in different directions and doing silly things. And at 11, 12 o'clock at night, I was going back to my hotel again I would see them at the entrances and exits to tube stations and bus stops and around the parks and all across London, making sure every guest of London got home safely. And every single one of those people was unpaid, every single one of those people was a volunteer. I took my hat off to them then, and I still do to this day. Because whether you're part of Rotary, or even whatever your companies are, or whatever you give in the community, just volunteering is a wonderful thing to do, and it makes us all have a better world. Thank you for your time today. I'm going to leave a few business cards here, if anyone wants to contact me. I'm on LinkedIn. I try and work in the public sector. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.